Welcome to Breaking Ceilings, Breaking Ground, the podcast celebrating the women redefining real estate development. I'm Molly McCabe, and alongside my co-host, Jill Ferrari, we're sitting down with the developers, the visionaries, and the builders whose projects and instincts are reshaping skylines and communities. What strikes you when you sit down and talk with women in this space is really how expansive their thinking is. Profit and community impact aren't competing priorities. They're part of the same calculation. That mindset is producing some of the most innovative development work in North America right now. This is a conversation about what's being built, the deals, the risks, the pivots, and the wins. So let's get into it. Jill, why don't you introduce our guest?
Today, we are honored to welcome Fabiola Fleuranvil, who lives in between two worlds, managing partner of Icon Heritage Partners, a real estate development and investment firm, and as CEO of Blueprint Creative Group, an SBA 8A certified consultancy serving federal, state, and corporate clients, both based in Miami and Detroit with teams across the country. Fabiola's involvement with causes and missions around South Florida has led to regular commentary and contributions in local and national media and several awards and recognitions, including the South Florida Business Journal's 2013 40 Under 40. Congratulations. The Miami Herald 2014 40 Under 40 and the Miami Herald's CEO Roundtable, among others. Welcome, Fabiola. We are so excited to have you here today and hear about all the incredible things you're doing across North America.
Thank you for having me. 2013 sounds so long ago. But I'm happy to be
here. We're just thrilled to have you. And I want to jump right in. One of the things that was really interesting to me, Fabiola, when I looked at your website, the very first thing that pops up is a quote from Mario Andretti. And it says, "If everything seems under control, you're not going fast enough." So I want to hear about what you're doing. I want to hear what projects you're working on. But maybe before we even jump into that, tell me a little bit about that. Tell us, how did you pick that quote? And how does that frame what you are in fact doing?
Well, I think that every entrepreneur has a little crazy in them. And I mean, this has been my entire life. Even though I have 2 degrees, I've never had a job. Got my MBA, came out of B school. Even though I had offers and job opportunities, I was like, that was not going to be my path. Even, I remember my very first instance with making money. I was in middle school and my mom bought leftover Halloween candy. And I've never had a sweet tooth, so I'll take it to school. Sold it, made that in one day. I was like, oh, I like this process. And that became my habit, my little hustle in the 7th grade until the school caught on and was like, okay, this is creating too much of a chaos with other kids and we're going to stop it. But I've always figured out how to make my own way. Actually, my graduate school, Clark Atlanta University, our motto has always been find a way or make a way. And that's kind of been like natural for me. So I've always figured out. And what gives other people heartburn, don't give me heartburn. It actually excites me. So for me, that quote is perfect because, in my life, everything moves like 1,000 miles per hour. And like sometimes I'm ahead of it and sometimes I'm just behind it. But that's the exciting part for me. So it gives me a lot of energy.
I love it. Well, tell us a little bit about what you're doing, kind of what projects you're working on right now. And, just give us sort of a quick overview.
Yeah. So on the development side, I came into Detroit in 2019. So I started investing in real estate when I was 22, bought my first investment property at the same time that I was starting up my company, my marketing agency, Blueprint Creative Group. First contract was with the state of Georgia. That was some years ago. And so purchased my first investment property literally, came out of grad school. I'm like, I'm not going the corporate route. Sat up in Barnes and Noble. That tells you that was some time ago when we had enough Barnes and Noble to just go to. Sat up in Barnes and Noble and just read real estate books. I mean, all the guys that you would normally see on the infomercials, right? On how to buy real estate, how to invest in real estate and all of that. Literally, I was like a freeloader at Barnes and Noble. reading books for free. And that's what I was doing. And for me, I was like, okay, this is going to be my path. And I ended up buying my first investment property in Atlanta. Uh, and it was
Wow.
during the heyday. And by 24, I had 3 investments. And that doesn't sound like big right now, but think about it. Came out of grad school with an MBA, but no job, no money, no credit, starting up my company. And that really was like my first taste of how do you get creative and innovative in,
Right.
real estate. And I did that because, at the time, the guy that I was dating, he was an entrepreneur. He had business. He was like, I don't know this real estate thing, but I know how you are. So I can get behind you on that. And so we formed a partnership at that time. And that
Mhm.
is what really helped me. And, market crash in '08, right? So you learn. But for me, I was like, I'm young. Like, whatever mistakes I made before then, like, those things are going to be erased by the time I'm even 28, 29, 30. So it didn't scare me. Nothing really scares me, but you learn from it. And fast forward, 2016, a few friends and I, we put money together. We're like, okay, we're going to invest in gentrifying neighborhoods in Miami. Climate
Yeah.
gentrification was starting to be the thing in
Mhm.
Miami, where, obviously everything's at sea level, but there was like two predominantly Black neighborhoods that was maybe like a little bit above sea level. And that's
Yeah.
where a lot of the investors were really starting to look at.
Oh,
And it was really transitioning things too fast, too quick in a neighborhood. So we put $120,000 on the table and said, we're going to just buy some properties. We'll rehab them. This will be our proof of concept, mission
Yeah.
focused, but this will be our opportunity to show that, millennials can come together. I don't know if I'm still a millennial, but I was a millennial then. But millennials can come together and show the power of collective,
Yes.
economics, us having a mission. And I mean, it made it to NPR, obviously the local papers. And because we developed this proof of concept where we purchased the property, we renovated it, sold it back to people in the community who were part of the down payment assistance program with the county. Like one property we sold for 175, the lady that purchased it got $90,000 in down payment assistance,
oh,
right?
wow.
So when you think about what that does for a
Yeah.
family immediately, right? So we created home ownership and we were very intentional. We want people who are from here, who know this neighborhood, who've been renting forever to be the ones who can buy it. So we did a
Yeah.
few of those properties, but my eyes were set on much bigger. And I also knew that in South Florida, you're dealing with deeper pockets. You're dealing with a different political structure. You're dealing with, the big boys and the
Mm.
big leagues, right? So I knew that for where my eyes were set, like I had a huge appetite. That appetite would not be satisfied in South Florida. Too many
Yeah.
barriers, too much competition. So I started to look in other markets. So I went into Jacksonville, purchased a historic property there. I did well in the purchase. I didn't like it as a community for me to like stay and invest
Yeah.
in.
Mm.
I didn't feel like I had my networks, the people, and all of that. So, because I had Atlanta as my background, I'm like, okay, let me look surrounding areas in Atlanta. I went to Birmingham, went to Macon, it's not quite it. And then, I don't know, Detroit came on my radar. I
Because
had
it's
no
so
idea
close
how.
to Atlanta.
Right. I had never been to Detroit, didn't know anyone from Detroit. I had one alumni friend from Detroit, my undergrad, Florida A&M University. And I said, hey, I'm coming in from New York. I think I'm going to stop in Detroit for a day. If you can just introduce me to one person, I just want to see the city. Cause he knew that I had been like toiling around with other markets and I just didn't feel like, I found my place and I was looking for my place where I could settle. And so I came into Detroit. I was like, this is my place. Even though when I came in, I was like, whew, this is a lot. You know, all you know about Detroit is what you read. This is like 2018, 2019. So I only
Yeah.
know what I read, right? And I didn't know this, but the city was starting to transition into what it is right
Yes.
now and what it's becoming. So I was like, this is a lot. I don't think I had been in the Midwest either to just understand the full dynamics of what happened in the Midwest. But I immediately felt like this is it. This is my place. I feel the ecosystem. I feel the vibe. I like the people. The people were like nice and kind. I came back the next day, stayed for almost a week. And I just kept coming back. And that's how I landed. That's my Detroit story. And for a while, I spent maybe a year and a half, 2 years. People like, why Detroit? And Miami, Detroit? Even Detroiters are like, who is this Miami girl? Like, we know Miami people are fast. Like, let's, watch her for a little bit. But no, it's been amazing to where fast forward 2026, I have 5 developments in Detroit. I have about $135 million under
Unbe-
development. My first project that actually broke ground last year, 2025, I'm now entering pre-leasing. It's 77 units of affordable senior housing. We'll be doing the ribbon cutting by late September. I purchased that building. I remember it like it was yesterday at an auction. This was the project that I saw on my second visit to Detroit, 2019. When I want something, I'm going to get it. I'll figure it out later. I don't need all the details. I don't need the business plan. So I have a very high tolerance for risk, and I have a lot of faith as well. I know what I can do, and I believe in my capabilities. So I saw the building that's going to be my building. It was maybe $850,000 at that time. By the time I purchased it at the auction for 300,000.
Oh, wow.
Only because who knows who was bidding against me, but I didn't
Right.
intend to spend that much. I intended to buy it for 100,000, but somebody was bidding against me. But I had been priming it for that 8-9 month period, and I won it February 2020, closed on it the day of the shutdown, March 13, 2020.
Ugh.
If you want to be scared by something, that would be enough to scare you.
Yeah.
If you want to like second guess your decisions, that would be enough to get you to second guess your decisions
Oh, yeah.
and to rethink your entire life, but I actually leaned into it because for me, I immediately saw, okay, this is going to be my moment because one thing, and I'm a woman of faith, like there's no reason why God would send me here. And I've been tracking this for 8 months and I finally got it. I didn't have all the details of how I'm going to finance it or anything. And for me to say that this is a mistake, this is not a mistake. So, but I needed that because even though it took 5 years to actually break ground, right? I feel like I got a second MBA. I probably got a doctorate during that process.
I
Yeah.
know what you
You
mean.
might want to call me Dr. Fabiola. I should have an honorary doctorate from the city of Detroit because what I learned throughout that process. I remember I walked into a CDFI's office. This is 2020. Remember, COVID is still
Oof.
there. No one's really outside. Okay, I'm
Yep.
here to get a loan. I want to redevelop this. It was 138 units when I purchased it. And it was already formerly senior housing, but it had been vacant at the time for like 12 years.
Oh,
Okay,
wow.
so I want to get a loan. This is the green in me. I want to get a loan, and I'm still in my 30s at that time. And I look back now, I'm like, wow, I did that. Sometimes we forget to pat ourselves on the back as women because, like,
Yep.
you're so heads down a lot, and you don't really think about it until someone like reminds me of something. I'm like, yeah, I did do that. So I'm like, okay, I'm getting a loan. He's like, loan? We don't do that. We do affordable housing. I'm like, what is that? He was like, LIHTC? Never heard of it. So I literally, for 3 weeks, and this is where I get voraciously ambitious about whatever it is that I need to learn. I consumed so much in that 3 week period. Like I took myself to school. I mean, YouTube University, Google University, like playing around with spreadsheets. I literally became an overnight underwriter. I am going to learn this thing that he mentioned. And I could have made a decision at that point, like, okay, I just walked into something that I don't know anything about. Like, this is not the plan. I purchased the building already. So at this point, I'm like, okay. But for me, I'm like, I'm going to run into this. I don't know what it is, but I thought I was going to get a commercial loan. I'm assuming maybe about $15 million to redevelop. He just said LIHTC. He didn't give me a lot of explanation, but since he said, this is what we do, then this is what I'm going to do. And that's what I did. And it's people called me crazy because I purchased it in a neighborhood that had not seen any investments in any development. And even locals were like, maybe 10 years from now, but you're early. Do you know the stories in this neighborhood? I'm like, it didn't matter. I purchased the building sight unseen because remember I bought it at the auction.
Auction. Yeah.
So after the fact, like when things started to open up again, with COVID, like mid 2020, and I drove around. I'm like, oh, thank God I didn't go in the building. Thank God I didn't see all of this
You know
because it
what I
probably
didn't know.
I right. But it
Yeah.
was, people were like, this neighborhood's not ready. This, Dexter Ave runs through, all the way north and south, and then Davison.
Mhm.
There's some energy at Davison, but you're too early. This neighborhood is disinvested. No, you don't want to be the first person on your first try in this
Mm.
neighborhood that you know nothing about. That was really what it was. And even like when I was starting to make my way through the city, like between housing and revitalization and planning department, they're like, do you know where you just purchased? No, I just purchased a big building because I liked the fact that it was big. And for me, I saw numbers, it was scale, So I'm like, okay, what could go wrong? Math is math at the end of the day. It's math. I have an asset and it's math at the end of the day. The everything else in between, that's like the fluffy stuff. But at the end of the day, it's 138 units. It's 70,000 square feet. Like, what's going to go wrong when you have math, right? And that's how I looked at it. How I get to the end goal is different, but I have something here that will work regardless. And slowly
Yeah.
but surely, what became this neighborhood is not ready from all levels, right? Not just people, but like institutionals, right? I need financing. I need funding. This neighborhood's not ready. Too much blight. We need to see greater investment around here. So I'm having to go back and restructure. I'm having to educate. I'm having to put a story together. I'm having to be collaborative between the city and the planning department, and they're also being collaborative with me because I'm not letting up, and they're like, okay, she's not going away. She's not going away. I mean, I actually had someone say, developing as a woman in this city is hard. We want to make sure that we don't run you off. And that was enough for me. Um, and I broke ground April 2025 as a 4 and a 9% LIHTC, something that
Mhm.
is not done often. And that's like you have to go to school just to do that,
Right?
but broke ground with a lot of fanfare between, the elected officials, different lenders. I mean, everyone there at the groundbreaking ceremony. And that was the first time it hit me. Like the first 15 seconds of me giving my welcome, like I saw the flood of tears about to come. And I was like, wow, I had been so heads down for 5 years, just like hustling, making it done. This
Yeah.
is a no. I went through 3 Mr. rounds,
Yeah.
okay, no here, no there. And even at my third round, I, I didn't get awarded for a technical. And I said, I'm going to, no, listen, we're protesting this. Listen, I did this 3 times. I'm not going through this again. And Mishta did a rule change because it was a valid, it was QCT, if you know anything about LIHTC.
Mhm.
And they issued a memo and we're going to now, put in this new rule about how we recognize QCTs.
Hmm.
Look at
And
you.
I thank the city because they also came in and got HUD involved and, all of that stuff. But to be where I am now, to where I have 3 other developments on that same quarter within a 10-block stretch, I have 4 developments, $75 million in total. One is being completed this September. I have one directly across the street that is in the 9% round. It's permanent supportive housing for those experiencing homelessness or fleeing domestic violence, 37 units there. So
Oh.
I'm excited about that project. And then 2 others, one is a mixed unit, 40 unit with ground floor commercial, 2 stories of residential. And then I have a fun one, which is 3 historic buildings that I am now pursuing federal and state historic tax credits. And half of that building is going to be a food hall concept. The other half is going to be shared artist studios for
Hmm.
emerging artists. And then a 5th project outside of that area is an adaptive reuse of a historic school. So if I would do it all over again, I would do it exactly the way I did it because that 5-year process taught me so much, and now I have all these financing tools that I have deep understanding on between
Yeah.
LIHTC. Now I'm doing federal
Good.
and state historic tax credits. I'm doing new market tax credits. I'm doing PSH, and doing commercial as well. So, I mean, what more could a girl ask for? So it's been fun.
It's such an amazing story, and every one of these conversations that we have, we just find such kindred spirits because I think the most important trait of a female emerging developer is resilience and just keeping your eyes on the prize and moving forward and shifting when you hit those barriers and keep moving forward. And that is exactly what you did. Although I do think it's interesting that this neighborhood that you picked, Russell Woods, is a target neighborhood for the city of Detroit.
I didn't
You
know
just
that.
happened to, right? And it is this space where resources have been kind of dedicated, but no one was willing to take that first leap and do the first iconic and catalytic project. And you've done that. Like the interest that you've sparked in that area, the tools that are being dedicated there, the city's putting out a whole bunch of RFPs for other developments. And a lot of that is because you just wouldn't quit and you kept moving forward on this one building, and it's going to change an entire area of Detroit as a result. So kudos
Yeah.
to you for just not taking no for an answer and having enough faith in yourself to do that. Because I feel like a lot of women that we work with in development, they hear no and it stops them in their tracks. And I think sometimes that's good. Sometimes there's, a different way to do it.
Right.
But I think just having that attitude that you are confident enough, competent enough, and resilient enough to keep moving forward is awesome. So
Absolutely.
just wanted to say that. I think it's amazing what you've done. And tell us, you're building very inclusive developments. You have senior housing, you have permanent supportive housing, housing for victims of domestic violence. One of the things that we love to ask our guests about is how the people in their life, the family that they have, friends they have, people they take care of or who've taken care of them, have influenced the way their projects are programmed. So are there folks in your world, your sphere of influence that have really impacted your projects?
Well, I feel like everything, like I live and breathe like my passion. So even without thinking about it, everything just eventually ends up being the things that are exciting to me anyway. So when I was maybe like in my 26 year mind, I've always been rebellious for one. So I've always been that activist. So even in South Florida, I was the one that was like speaking out against stuff and writing in the op-eds and all of that stuff. So they put me on boards to get me to be on their side, right? But there was an elderly woman. She was from my alumni, Florida A&M, and I met her at an alumni association. I was the only person maybe under 40 years old. She was 90, in her 90s at the time.
Oh,
We
wow.
ended up being besties until she died at 105 years old, April
Wow. Oh.
2020. Yes,
Mm.
105. And when I say besties, like I adopted her because my grandparents had already passed on. So we would like kiki on the phone, talk about everything. So imagine the type of influence that
Yeah.
she has. 28, I'm 25, 26, 27, 28, and all the way till she died at 105. So when I look at the senior housing building, and now my father, even though my parents are together and he's at home, but I think about if he were not married and he had to be independent, the housing that he would need, right? And she went into her period, Miss Charlie Brown is her name, before she passed, where she had to be moved into nursing home
Yeah.
and assisted living. So that building initially was going to be affordable assisted living.
Hmm.
Yeah. It was going to be affordable assisted living because being in assisted living is extremely expensive. Uh,
Yeah.
And a lot of people really, if they can do it and age gracefully at home and have the services at home, it would
Yes.
be more economic for the
Yeah.
system, right? Medicaid, Medicare, government, etc. But because there's no buffer, there's not that affordable assisted living environment, they put them into a nursing home,
Yeah.
which costs, nursing home these days could be ten to $15,000 a month. You
Yeah.
could do that more affordably. It just didn't work to do the assisted living model in
Yeah.
Michigan. And
Yeah.
I burned maybe 2 years just trying to make that assisted living. But when I think about that building, the senior housing part, I think about the elderly people like her in my
Yeah.
life, right? PSH. directly across the street. Imagine me coming out of grad school, fresh, like, I'm not gonna get a job. I don't want to be corporate. Well, you still have bills to pay, honey. You still have rent to do. So, I've had my own issues of instability, right? Maybe
Yes.
very, very short time frame, but still I think about, you know, a lot of people could be like a quick paycheck away from housing instability. And I
Yeah.
had a little short taste of that, and I know what that could mean to somebody. And even when I had my first investment property in Atlanta, I rented it out to people who they had a job, it was just not enough for them to have housing, so the
Right.
rooms became like separate, units for them, right? So you have people like that. They're working, it's just not enough. Think about Miami. You could actually be making a good wage. As expensive as Miami is, it's just not enough, right?
Yeah.
So when I think about the PSH, it kind of reminds me of some of these, stories and experiences that have been around me as well. And when I came into that corridor, and even now, I pray for economic revival over that area. And you think about what makes a community, right? What makes a community prosper? What brings economic revival to an area? And you have to think more. My background started in economic development when I was like in my activism days. So, I was like chair over an economic development agency, and I was involved with like different economic development organizations. So I didn't know what I was consuming in my 20s being around economic development agencies, but
Right.
it all started to blend together when I think about placemaking. And I think about how you design and bring energy to a neighborhood. And knowing that there's been no precedent on Dexter yet for what commercial could look like, I'm being thoughtful of not assuming that I can go in and set precedent, but let's build it with the people around. So the food hall concept is meant for micro food and beverage entrepreneurs. So
Hmm.
those who are your commissary type tenants, they've been in kitchen incubators, they have a food truck, and they're ready for the next step, but not quite ready to be fully independent and do their own build out, you can come
Yeah.
into the food hall because the build out is there, it's delivered turnkey. You get to operate from day one. Same thing with the shared artist studios. I know what art and the creative economy can do to revive a neighborhood, good and bad,
Yeah.
because I know that
Yeah.
it can also change the fabric of a neighborhood, and the people who made the neighborhood no longer see themselves there, right? So you
Right.
have to be mindful of that. So I went in talking to art curators that I know that were doing similar work in other areas. So the artist studio space is really about giving creatives their own independent space. Think of a WeWork for artists,
Yeah.
very affordable, couple of $100 a month. You get to go in, you have your own independent workspace, but you have gallery space in the front where you can exhibit your work and you can use it as gathering space and event space.
And we've seen this work in other areas of Detroit, but now folks are getting priced out of
Right.
downtown and Eastern Market and up on the Grand River corridor. So we know this concept works. So it's just, a great asset for this neighborhood in particular.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Let me ask you a question. Be- I just love the way you're focused on community and on the people who live there and what their needs are. I'm also cognizant that sometimes that's really hard to fund and finance and find investors for. So, can you talk a little bit about who, much as I assume that your $100+ million is probably not coming out of your own pocket, you probably have partners and investors. Can you talk about, you know, kind of how you've brought them along, how, kind of what that story looks like? Because one of the things we really want to talk to are emerging women developers. And sometimes it feels very overwhelming to figure out how you're bringing your capital in. And I'd love to have you talk your personal story about that piece of it.
I started the fund so that I could bring capital in. And then when I discovered all these other financing tools, I never raised money in the fund. So with
Interesting.
LIHTC, you're
Yeah.
bringing in tax credit investors. New
Yep.
markets, you're bringing in tax credit investors.
Yeah.
Federal and historic tax credits. I've been using the tools that exist that, you know, the bigger developers use all day long. It's
Mm-hmm.
the emerging developers, the women developers, the Black developers, the minority developers. We're the ones that have not had that type of access or even visibility into understanding how these tools are available for all of us. So that's where I feel like I got the PhD in, just realizing that, a lot of times it's I can say this because I started out with one property at a time, right? You're like, okay, if I don't have the cash for it, if I can't get finance for millions in loans, I'm not going to be able to do it. But there's leverage out there and is using the leverage. And those days of sitting in that Barnes and Noble and reading the books, that really helped me to really change that frame that I was
Yeah.
thinking in.
I love that.
And
Go ahead, Jill.
so, we ask typically, what's your superpower? And just hearing you talk about how you have pulled together this collaborative support, particularly for the Russell Woods project, is community building and resilience. Waiting for the community to come with you. Is that your superpower, or is there something else that you would say is the foundation of your success?
Well, I would say it's a couple of things. So definitely resilience. I owe it to, so I'm a first generation American. So both of my parents were born in Haiti, the Caribbean culture of Haiti, and that's the first free Black nation in the world. They fought for their freedom. That's the only known Black community in the world to have, defeated the colonizers. So and from that moment on, resilience became the backstory to Haiti and Haitians. And that's something that was ingrained from the very moment. Even though, because of instability and dictatorship in the 70s and 80s, people had to flee and come to the US to create a second life. But that's how we were raised, right? That there is never a no that you cannot get around. So no
Hmm.
one can ever tell me a no. Not even my
That's
parents could tell me a no. You
That's
know?
and is that part of the name? So Icon Heritage Partners, we were going to ask you, where does that come from? Is that tied together with your personal heritage and your drive?
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
Its heritage is about lineage, but it's also legacy, what you're
Yeah.
doing for, 200 years from now. So, and I'm very forward thinking, so that's another superpower. So I don't think about like now, like in my
Mhm.
mind, I'm already thinking about 50 years from now. When I was in my mid 30s, when I was creating my life plan and my estate plan, we did it with a 200 year in
Wow.
mind. Yeah.
Wow. Well,
So, yeah,
Miss
because
Shirley Brown lived to be 105. So,
right.
I see no reason why Fabiola can outlive her.
Now,
Right.
I don't need to live 200 years, but obviously I'm not doing anything just for me, right? There's people down that food chain, that value
Mhm.
chain that's going to still benefit and eat from whatever it is that I do, whatever it is that you do. I'm just more mindful of it right now, So, yeah, so my superpower is that you give me something, I don't need a lot. Just give me like a little nugget, a little drop. Like being in that CDFI's office and
Mhm.
he said, "We do affordable." And that was the first and only introduction that I needed.
Yeah.
That's all I need. So I can take from a mustard seed and make it into, everything. I always say the seed to the forest is in my hands. So, yeah, I can do a lot with a little bit.
I can see the power of faith working through you there
Oh,
as you
absolutely.
as you weave in the mustard seed to conversation.
It's amazing.
Look, I
Mm.
want to ask you a question, which I don't know. We haven't really talked about this, and I don't know how active you are, but still with this. But you and a friend started the Institute of Black Wealth, and I was really inspired by what you have put together there, and maybe if the field hasn't been is not level. It's not level certainly for Black people. It's certainly not level for women. But I think what you have done is you put it in this very positive way about how do we lift up? What are those key factors and features that can help people move and build wealth and to create this legacy like you're talking about. Can you talk a little bit about, the Institute of Black Wealth and to me that's such an it's one of our questions is where's the opportunity for innovation? And to me that is one little piece, one thread on that opportunity for innovation.
Yeah, the Institute of Black Wealth is really meant to close knowledge gap and access gap. Those are the two biggest barriers to wealth, right? lack of knowledge. You don't have foresight and insight into what's available. You don't know what you don't
Mm.
know. So you don't ask the right questions that you should be
Right.
asking. You
That's
don't
right.
get introduced to those tools, right? That you could be using and leveraging. I come across a lot of women who are like, how do I develop this and how do I do this? And really, if they had more information, right? And it's so easy to think that information is all around us just because we have AI, we have YouTube, we have tools, but you only know to the extent that you're in that environment.
Right.
And for a lot of people, if you're not in those environments, if people are not speaking money, they're not speaking wealth, if they're not speaking strategy around you, if that's not something that you live and breathe, it's so hard. And for women, and I was sharing this with some girlfriends, I was like, when I get around my guys, we talk about money, we talk about
Mhm.
business, talk about development so easily. Like,
Mhm.
but when I get around women, because there's so much that we have to catch up on in life, how the kids are doing, how the spouse is doing, family, your skincare, perimenopause, menopause. You're catching up on so much. Like, when do we have time to talk about money?
Yeah,
We
yeah.
don't talk about money amongst women. And I told one of my girlfriends, I'm like, it blows my mind. Nobody picks my brain.
Right?
Nobody's picking my brain. She's like, it just seems so intimidating. It just seems so much. I was like, first of all, your dad is a wealth advisor. It's not like you haven't been introduced to wealth. You know it, but like we know the basics, like your retirement. Like women, we're gonna have our retirement together,
Yeah.
right? We'll have our savings together. We'll do the what we need to do. Credit is gonna be good. But in terms of like the more advanced stuff, like
Uh-huh.
it's just so intimidating to women because it's been such a boys club.
Yeah.
And I hate going to conferences because when I go to conferences, it's probably like 6, 7 women, maybe 2 Black, maybe 1 Hispanic, and then the rest white.
Uh-huh.
And it's just us. And then here goes all the guys, 1,000 men, and they're huddled. They have beer in hand. They're talking about sports and, whoever was playing last week and, the car. And like, I literally have been there, like, how am I going to inject myself into the huddle? Because I need to network too. I came into the conference to network, but it's very few of us and so many of them. And they're not doing it on purpose. Men gather with each other, right? And they can
Yeah.
talk about the
Yeah.
things that we can't talk about. So it's hard. So women are not naturally just doing this so openly. We have so many
Right.
other things to take care of and be focused on that. And I tell my girlfriends, like, yeah, no one's asking me how I'm doing it. So the Institute of Black Wealth is my way of saying how I did it. And
Love it.
here's what's available. Here's what's out there. Here's the secret that it's not really a secret, but if you want to think of it as a secret, here's the secret. Here's how they're doing it. We can do it too. So it's
That's
really
great.
about bringing that knowledge and closing that knowledge gap. And actually, for this year's Institute of Black Wealth, and say, you guys, this is how good Detroit has been to me. This is how good the people have been to me. If any of you want to take me up on an offer, come up to Detroit. And I had 6 people come up.
Oh,
It
wow.
was the Read Black Developers Bus Tour. Come up. I'll
Oh,
host you
I
while you're
saw
here.
that. That was
Yes.
great. I saw
And
that.
they
Yeah.
came up, and I just ran into someone. She was like, you don't know what that conference did, the Institute of Black Wealth conference did for me. And I was like, tell me, what did it do? She was like, just how it just shifted how I was thinking. And just, she was telling me what she's like looking at right now in terms of like
Yeah.
investments. So it's really just, those people that came up is because they just needed a spark and, it took off for them. But how often do you get to sit in a room to where it's not the big guy speaking like all this, stuff and it's flying over your head and you have no access? It's someone just like you and you're able to like relate and so like, oh, that's all. That's all it was. That's all it took. So that's really what it's about. So once you can close the knowledge gap and the
Mm.
access gap, obviously, if we're not around the table, we don't have the access. But why aren't we the table? Right?
Right.
Exactly.
So we can be the table, we can create our own access. So I'm all about, remember my first project, it was a guy that I dated. Like I created my own access, right? And then
Yeah.
I came together with some friends. We put $120,000.
Right.
That's how you create your own access.
Yes.
It might look
Yeah.
different than somebody else's, but it gave us what we needed for where we were.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really what it's about, and I
Totally.
think it can apply to a lot of different ways. But I really want women to just get comfortable, just all of my stock tips come from men. I'm like, I don't have girlfriends telling me what ETFs they're buying or no one's talking about a building that they're looking at. Come on, girls, we can do better.
What keeps women from going into development per se?
So fear is one. I remember when I bought my first house. And I was in my 20s, and the immediate comment was, "You're not even married. Why are you buying a house and you're not even married? You're buying it on your own?" So I think the tradition. I mean, think about it. It was only in the 80s when a woman can get her own business loan or bank account, right, without a man,
Right. Without a signature. Right.
without a
Right.
signature.
Right.
That's not
Crazy.
that long ago. So, and I think even now, the idea of doing things on your own from that level, because it's always been like that's a masculine thing. And I'm very cognizant that I'm wearing a masculine hat or I'm in the masculine role, right? I always inject my femininity into it because the perception would be she's masculine or, that might carry into her personality or how she is at home as well when that's, far from it. So I think it's just always been the idea that this is something that men do and is not something that women traditionally do on their own.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I can even say when I bought my first property, it was because, I had a guy that was, doing it with me as well. But that hasn't always been the case. But I think there's a level of fear that comes with that. The perception. What
Yeah.
if things fall and break,
Right.
right? Who's gonna be at your rescue? Who are you gonna call on? And then women, we don't talk about money.
Right.
We don't talk about money. Maybe now we're starting to just because, women are coming into like this new age where we're getting more advanced degrees, staying single longer, or marriages are not working out. So you're having to be independent and, think about those things. But we traditionally have not talked about money amongst girls and how to make money. So I think development just seems so far fetched. It seems so, out of this world. It seems like so exclusive and that we
Yeah.
don't have
Yeah.
access to that exclusive club. And only because somebody gave you access, that would be the only reason why you would be in that space. So I think that keeps a lot of women out of development. And for us, that one house at a time flip is
Mhm.
probably what we're thinking we have the capacity to do.
Well,
Right. So,
I loved your comment earlier about, if I believe I can buy $100 million building, I just know I can. I may not know how, where the money's coming from, but I just know that that's possible. And
yeah.
and I do think that's a shift in mindset for many women, that kind of opportunity is out there. And if you want to partner on a project in Montana, you call me. I am down.
I mean, listen, I'm not scared to go anywhere,
Mhm.
and I'm not one of those people that will claim to know everything. So I'm very hungry about learning, and I learn from other people as well. And one thing about me, I'm not rigid. I don't have to stay planted with what I think I
Right.
know. Like, I can shift, not because like I flow with the wind, but I wait to validate what I think is true through other people, and maybe like there's a different way of thinking, a different way of doing it. So yeah. So it's really about, you know, fear is a big thing. You don't understand how much fear cripples people.
Yeah.
Fear is
Yeah.
very crippling. And you may have the most confidence in the world and you don't realize where fear can cripple you in other areas in your
Mhm.
life. And it shows up, you know. So, yeah.
But I do think that for women in this space, there is this commonality of superhumanness.
Mm.
And it isn't because we were given something, right? That we feel like we can do anything. It's because of our heritage, our childhood, our surroundings, it doesn't whatever it is, it has given this sense that we can do this if we have the right information, the right resources, these things. We can do this. And I think that's it's a required ingredient for women to get through this. Because if you don't have that, if you don't have the competence, that you can do this if you have these things, you're going to stop. You're going to give up. You're going to shift and do something else, which is fine. But to keep going, to keep moving forward, you have to have that superhuman belief in yourself.
It does require that because I always say hard stuff is hard. I want to say a different word, but hard stuff is hard, right? And it's meant to be hard. I mean,
Yep.
I've been in situations where even getting through my first deal, I had to go off screen because a couple of tears.
Mhm.
And imagine being in a man's world and the
Right.
woman in you, the feminine side in you, like we're I have all those sensitivities and emotions, right?
Yep.
I'm gonna get through it, but I'm not gonna stop being the woman that I am and acting
Right.
in my whole femininity just because I'm in a man's world. So I went off screen, I let the tears fall, and I came back on screen, and still came at it. So, and I think that's what it is. But it also puts the responsibility on us. Obviously, men don't have that responsibility to say, I'm going to go
Right.
out and teach other men and
Yeah.
expose them to that. So they can be selfishly focused on their goal and what they want to
Yeah.
do without having a responsible or the responsibility of reaching back for others. But as a Black woman, as a woman, we have that responsibility. It might be a big
Yeah.
burden and a lot of weight to carry, but that's the fact that we've been given that access and we have that access,
Yes.
a
Yes.
platform like this is needed,
Right.
WSDI, because
Yeah.
if you don't do it, how are you going to close that gap for other women?
Yeah.
So
Right.
it creates more work at the end of the day, but there's a bigger purpose to it.
And
Right.
I really think that women, as a general rule, are better developer. Don't tell the men. I think they're better developers because they come into it with this context of community, of what the
Yes.
community needs, and we're really leaning into whatever it is you're hearing from the community and taking those pieces and creating something better. You're weaving the fabric in a way that is beautiful. And not to say that some men don't have that capacity, but I think women are uniquely qualified to do that. And I think
Right.
because of that, we create things that are different. And I also
Mm.
think, Jill and I've used the term persevere and pivot. And you talked about kind of what you did. You went into the CDFI, they told you it was LIHTC, and you went, okay, I'm going to pivot from you giving me information to me figuring out what it is that I can do to meet your needs on affordable housing. And then we
Yes.
partner together and you give me money and I'm creating affordable housing. So
Right.
persevere and pivot.
Yeah.
And going back
Right.
to what you said about how we're more mindful naturally.
Hmm.
I have an example of that. So I'm my architect is doing drawings for one of my developments, and granted, this corridor is being reshaped. So he's developing a lot more. He's putting in a lot more studios,
Hmm.
right? Coming from
Mm.
the brush parks, doing those
Right.
projects there. You know, the footprint, more money brings more revenue if you can fit more studios
Right.
versus one and
Right.
two bedrooms. And I had to say, listen, first of all, this is a neighborhood. This is not
Right.
downtown. This is
This is
Right.
not
families.
this is families. I cannot put 350 square feet. I don't care how it looks economically. I'm going
Right.
to be responsible to these people in this neighborhood when they're like, who did this? Who designed this? Yes, it financially could look good. I don't want that
Right.
family to come back to me and say that this is what I designed. Okay, we'll add in 25. No, if we're not going to do at least 450 square feet, then no studios,
Yeah.
Hmm.
one and two bedrooms. And I even had to say, listen, I need you to take your middle class hat off. I had to say
Right.
it. I need you to
Right.
take your
Yeah.
middle class hat off.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
because this is not always about the economics of it at the
Right.
end of the day.
Right.
You have to
Right.
design it for the people. I don't know
Yes.
how I can't say if a man would have responded the same way, but I know that as a woman, like I'm gonna have to be responsible to the neighborhood.
Yeah.
So
And thank God that you have been.
Yeah.
yeah. So
Well, that's our hope, right, Jill? We're hoping that that we can take this and really pivot it into access and education and learning and all of those things that you're talking about. It's
Yes.
just tremendous, tremendous.
yeah.
Well, it is time for us to wrap this episode of
Yay.
Breaking
Yeah.
Ceilings, Breaking Ground. Fabiola, thank you so much for being with us. Every time we talk to another female developer, it just re-energizes us and our purpose for this platform to create that table that you're talking about and fill it with as many women as possible that are really innovating in commercial real estate and having the patience and resilience to stick with it because you know that it's what the community needs. You know that it's the right project. So thank you so much for being here today. It's been wonderful talking to you.
Do you have any I'm probably stepping on Jill has her I know she was gonna
No.
ask you this, but I'm curious, is there, if people wanted to contact you, how would they reach you? And is there anything out there that you would love to, get from somebody else? Are you looking to hire people? You probably don't need money. It sounds like you've got that covered.
Who doesn't need
Want some
money?
stock?
Right?
What are
Better
you looking
money,
for?
cheaper money.
Cheaper money, faster money,
Faster
fewer
money.
guarantees.
Yes. Well, I'm g I'm so lucky right now, I'm blessed right now that there is not a thing that I need that I don't have access to.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, so, yeah, I can't even th to be listen, this might sound I I feel like I participate in God's economy, everything's available to me. So, the way my mind thinks, if I wanna buy a $100 million building, if I really wanna buy that $100 million building, I can buy that $100 million building. I can't tell you where the financing is gonna come from, but that's how I've always operated in everything that I've done. So, I never think about what I lack,
Hmm.
It's what
right? Or even what I need. I think about what I want, And so what I want, everything else that I need will come to me. So, yeah,
and
I
what
think
you
that's great
and what
advice.
you're so gracious and what you give and what you share. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
absolutely. Absolutely. If you feed others, others will feed you eventually. So, yeah. But in terms of contact, LinkedIn is
Agreed.
always cool because I get to keep up with what other people are doing as well. So, you can always reach me on LinkedIn and I'm responsive there.
Okay, great.
Excellent.
Well, we hope you all wrote that down to connect with Fabiola on LinkedIn. I know I stalk her on LinkedIn and follow everything that she does. It's
I watch you.
fabulous. We hope you found today's conversation as inspiring and empowering as Molly and I did. If you love this episode, make sure to subscribe to Breaking Ceilings, Breaking Ground, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you know a woman in real estate development whose story should be shared, reach out through our website, www.breakingceilingsbreakingground.com. We'd love to talk to her as well. Don't forget to leave us a review and share this podcast with your network. Together, we can continue to amplify the voices of women shaping the future of real estate, just like Fabiola. Until next time, keep breaking ceilings and breaking ground.
Thanks so much, Fabiola. Great to have you.
My pleasure. Thank you.